ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? It's Cairo, and it's been quite some time. Hope you're all doing well and thriving in real life and in this great game that is RuneScape. Anyway, the Arch-Glacor is out, and it's one hell of a boss. I've been enjoying it to say the least. Great things about the boss are plenty, and hence super addicting. This new PvM masterpiece is a hybrid mix between Telos and Raksha. Enrage and Streaky, with an absolute need to prayer flick correctly. I think it takes equally from both bosses while not restricting you to use manual combat. This is specifically because it's not necessary to phase at specific moments, stun lock or lure, where manual outshines revolution all the time. This boss is as simple as it is a DPS dummy. However, it does require a bit of movement, but not a whole lot of thinking to really get it down. So for all you plebs out there like myself who cannot be bothered to press your keyboard keys because you're too afraid your sausage fingers will teleport you to the ice plateau, here is a little revolution guide on how to attempt this colossal icy bone structure. There are already a couple of guides out there, but it's important to brush over the mechanics once more to get a better idea of how this fight will be. The mechanics are the following: Flurry, which are multiple auto attacks with all three parts of the combat triangle dealing more damage than regular auto attacks. The Frost Cannon, which binds you in place and hits you for 3 very strong magic attacks. Pillars of Ice, which spawn on a more westerly bias in the arena. These hit for a rapid hard typeless damage that scales with Enrage. During this mechanic, this boss is invulnerable for the first part of it. Minions, which are tiny little glassites that make the boss invulnerable while they're alive, 2 melee and 2 magic. These glassites spawn from 0 to 249% Enrage. At 250 and higher, a 5th glassite spawns with more health that uses melee. At 2500 Enrage, the health of these glassites will scale as you push further. And lastly, the Exposed Core, also known as the Cuddle. The Arch-Glacor will block you with its arms and be invulnerable during this mechanic, but in all honesty, I think you should be asking for consent first. Now, let's get into the gear, perks, inventory, relics, and ability bar. For my gear, I'm wearing Sirenic top and bottom. These are perked with Biting 4, Impatient 4, Devoted 4, Crackling 4, Relentless 5, and Enhanced Devoted. Fleeting boots are the best ranging boots in game, so I take an enhanced version for the enhanced experience. The boss is poisonable, Cinderbanes are best in slot here. A ranged Kiln Cape, Reaver's Ring, an Essence of Finality with an ECB spec, although this I only use for 300% or less in Rage. 50 Ruby Criminal Bolts, the Scripture of Wen, which is insanely good for clearing minions, and overall increase the damage output, not to mention cheap as hell right now. For weapons, I main dual Blightbounds perked with Precise 6 Aftershock 1 on the main hand and Caroming 4 and Equilibrium 2 on the offhand. The switches in my inventory are an Ancient Repriser for planted feet and a Calphite Repriser for popping off defensives without major loss to DPS. This Repriser is perked with Caroming 4 Ruthless 1, which is a failed perk combo attempt, but still useful enough. The auras I most recommend for this boss depend on whether you want to push high in Rage or streak from 0. Either way, damage auras like Majorat, Dark Magic, or Reckless are great for streaking from low in Rage. Otherwise, Anticipation is best for high in Rage, pushing for the added adrenaline gains, which could most certainly save a kill in a tight situation. As a rule of thumb, I like to streak for 3 hours at a time because apparently Enrage and streaking do not affect unique drop rates. Do not quote me on this hasn't been confirmed. I use Reckless for the first hour, which takes me to around 260 to 300% in Rage, Majorat or Dark Magic for the second hour, which lands me around 480 to 520 in Rage, and lastly, Anticipation for the third hour, where I end up around 670 to 710 in Rage. At that point, I end my streak and claim whatever I got. In my inventory, I'm carrying 1 Elder Overload, 1 Weapon Poison+++, 1 Adrenaline Potion, my switches mentioned before, as well as a Ring of Vigor to start the kill and if needed later throughout the fight, an Enhanced Excalibur for free heals, 50 Dragonstone Criminal Bolts to switch to as the boss's health falls below the 40-ish% mark. Although Emerald Criminal Bolts may be better, I haven't tried them personally, so experiment if you'd like. Also important to say, a lot of Adren is insanely helpful for this boss, so technically the best bolts to use here are Hydrix, but that's an added expense I'm not financially capable of, but really I'm just being cheap. Mechanized Chins are pretty much a requirement here to clear minions, so I take 25. So long as abilities are being fired, the Chins will never be used up. I take a second Essence of Finality with an SGP stored. This amulet basically becomes the primarily used one post 300% Enrage. I have a Luck of the Dwarfs to loot before teleporting, and lastly, some Spiritual Prayers, Cerebrews, and Sailfish. This goes without saying. Take a Ripper Demon with scrolls. This boss requires you to prayer flick, and if you're doing well enough, a Yak or a Mammoth are not required. This voiceover is actually being recorded a couple of days after I got these kills, and I'm currently at 1500% Enrage, and I am still getting kills where I use no food. My guess is it's going to remain somewhere close to that, up to 2000%, so yeah, just keep prayer flicking and you won't use that many supplies. For relics, I use Fury the Small for better adren gains, Persistent Rage for the quality of life more than anything else, as well as Heightened Senses, which is the best relic in my opinion for all sorts of PvM scenarios. A relic that I don't use often is Death Ward, which is apparently a lifesaver in some situations. Might want to give it a try if you have it unlocked. The ability bar I use is shown now. Basically the most optimal Revo++ bar found on the wiki for dual-wielded range combat, with a couple of abilities switched and removed to fit my style. Before we get into the kill, just a quick summary of my experience thus far. There are so few differences to a 0% hard mode kill and a 1000% hard mode kill. The only notable things are at 250% Enrage, an extra minion is summoned, and simply the increase in damage the boss can do, and the life points it has. That's it. Those are pretty much the only things you can anticipate. Otherwise, the fight is entirely modular. At all points of the fight, you need to be ready to deal with any of his mechanics. Keep in mind, when he's used his first 5 mechanics, he could use the last mechanic of his first 5 as the first mechanic of his next 5, which basically means you can very easily get back-to-back mechanics, which is really annoying to deal with should it occur. Sounds terrifying, yes, but once you get the general gist of how to do this, the fight becomes a lot easier and more relaxed. So much so that I am certain if I keep my current pace, I'll be able to hit Silver Ice Warden using Revo. Imagine that. Think of this boss's rotations like the Queen Black Dragon. She's got a couple of mechanics, no specific order on when she'll use them. Same idea, except QBD is trash and this guy will drop a 10k on your face. Free death week's over, by the way, folks. Proceed with caution. Let's get into the kill. I sip whatever needs to be sipped, turn on Protect from Magic and Desolation, turn on my book, all that good stuff, and stand in this spot. Fun fact, this spot is the exact middle of the arena. It is important to Death Swift on this spot, or any spot on that south to north line. More on that in a second. As mentioned before, the fight is entirely modular. You may choose to start with a Death Swiftness, but there's a 60% chance that a lot of it is wasted. How do I derive 60%? Well, there are 5 mechanics. 3 of them make Death Swiftness much less useful against the boss because you either need to move or the boss is invulnerable and waste your Death Swiftness timer. Regardless of this fact, I use Death Swift whenever it's off cooldown after this point, so long as I know there isn't going to be a mechanic that wastes it again. Either way, you won't always be able to predict the best time to use Death Swiftness on this boss. You just have to do it and have a go with the flow kind of attitude and approach. In this particular instance, the first mechanic could either be Pillars of Ice or Frost Cannon, but because no creeping ice spawns from the other side of the arena, I know for sure that the mechanic here will be Pillars of Ice. I surge to the west side and wait for the pillar to approach me. As it does, I'll run north then surge east to dodge the first pillar. As the ice shatters, the second pillar spawns in the middle and more on the east side of the arena. At this point, there's about 5 to 6 game ticks before the third and final pillar spawns, which could be in a very close proximity to me. The pillars begin doing damage about 3 ticks after spawning, so switching to the Repriser and activating Barricade on the tick the third pillar spawns will make sure I do not take any damage. In this instance, I got a lucky Relentless proc and was able to make use of the remaining time on my Death Swiftness. At much higher enrages, using Barricade becomes less meta and more a hindrance because it may be more useful for using during a flurry to mitigate damage. So far, however, I'm still able to survive flurries without using food during a kill at this enrage point, so for now, I'm cating instead of bringing a Bladed Dive switch and properly dodging the pillars. I just find it safer and more relaxed. A challenging thing about this boss at first is the use of the mechanic when the one prior hasn't ended yet. In this case, the boss is beginning its next mechanic, which I know for certain will be a Frost Cannon signaled by the creeping ice beginning on the east side of the arena. As mentioned before, there are only 2 mechanics for when this happens, and he's already used his Pillars of Ice, and no back-to-backs are expected, so it will be guaranteed Frost Cannon. Notice my current positioning, hence why it is important to start a Death Swift at that point mentioned earlier in the beginning of the kill. Where I am currently standing will allow me to benefit from my Death Swiftness while also being in that area that is going to be surrounded by the ice. If the frost cannon takes place on the eastern side instead of the western side of the arena, the placement is still perfect. Side note, the frost cannon can also occur in the middle of the arena, which can mimic another mechanic, but more on that in a sec. When the ice stops moving, I use either Freedom or Anticipation to not get stunned, and use Devotion with Deflect Magic active to negate all damage. Simple and straightforward. But in the case that the frost cannon occurs back to back, or Devotion is still on cooldown for whatever reason, another way to deal with the cannon is to Anticipate, switch to the Repriser, and use Reflect, Debilitate, Resonance, other defensives as such. Make sure Deflect for Magic is the active prayer. The total damage taken will be diminished by a substantial amount. The next mechanic I received on this skill was the Flurry. When the game prompts me with the Arch-Glacor focuses on attacks, hold on to your RGB gaming rug because shit's about to get real. Creeping Ice won't move too far out from the edges, and at this point the auto attacks can be range, mage, or melee, and they seem to hit about twice the damage. Flicking accurately is important. At 500% rage, any misflick is near guaranteed death at max life points. The survivability depends entirely on remaining calm. Don't flash back to 2009 when you attempted Jad for the first time. Soul Split in between flicks is necessary to keep life points high, and at much higher enrages, defensives are required like Reflect, Debilitate, Resonance, Devotion, and Barricade to stop the absolute barrage of damage this boss can do. This is the best time to use Death Swiftness also. While the Arch-Glacor gets into this enraged form, he can also be hurt because there's nothing causing you to move and he's not invulnerable during this mechanic. Like before, the boss loves to overlap mechanics, but he's still using his flurry as he's summoning his minions. At this point, I'll switch to Chins and try to target a melee Glassite as they get blocked by the magic ones, which are immobile when they spawn. The idea is you hope to kill off all the Glassites at once, but second best scenario is making sure the melee ones are dead before the magic ones so they don't start moving all over the place and screwing up your Chins. Also, I do not know who designed these click boxes, but this shit is literally AIDS. When the Glassites are dead, I switch back to my Blight main hand and finish off the big Glassite. After the small Glassites die, they'll leave behind an orange ball. Click it. It's pretty helpful, but also make sure to click the balls after all the Glassites, including the big one, is dead. Otherwise, it's not really helpful. After that, the Creeping Ice starts moving towards the middle of the arena, and he's already done his Flurry and his Frost Cannon, so this will signal the last mechanic of his first 5, which is the Cuddle. The Glacor is invulnerable during this mechanic, and you'll begin to take rapid magic damage every tick, which is very tiny and nothing to worry about. But the longer you stay inside this Cuddle, the more damage you'll take, and it could get very dangerous. Kill one of the arms to deal with this mechanic, then switch your focus back onto the Arch-Glacor. And that's it. The mechanics will repeat in no particular order for the remainder of the fight. I know I'm using close to a max setup here, and I know many cannot afford or have what's being brought in this video, but to keep it simple, you can do this boss with Ascensions and Pernix and have very similar results to anyone with my gear. And honestly, it is preferred to take Nex and Ascensions if you plan to only streak from 0 to 500, where this boss really shines in terms of GP an hour. Less upkeep cost is always a plus, so do not be discouraged by the setup. Use what you can. The boss is very beginner friendly from 0 to 300 and starts to get a little more spicy around 400. Other important things to think about that I personally don't make use of, not because I can't, but because I can't be bothered to complicate things further, are Disruption Shield, Vengeance, or Smoke Cloud. I will be looking into adding these spells into my fights further than 1.5k. Anything to keep the kill times down is great. A bladed dive switch for proper dodging of the pillars. Currently, I prefer the super safe method of using Barricade, but you lose out on a lot of adrenaline, and it negatively affects the kill times. And a second EOF with Darkbow to throw into the mix post 300% enrage. Overall, the boss is great. Definitely a breath of icy, fresh air in this game. I was mildly underwhelmed by Carapac, but the Arch-Glacor really hit the spot for me. I think overall the approach Jagex is taking with the Elder God Wars is great, and the bosses thus far are vastly different and unique in their own ways in comparison to what we saw in God Wars 1 and 2. And it is apparent that Jagex did deliver on their promise of this being a PvM encounter that anyone can attempt and enjoy, all while easing you into high-level PvM. Very well done. I personally still have a lot to experience with this boss. I most certainly will keep going for 2k, which at the given point in time is only about 500% away, and definitely achievable from what I'm seeing so far. Don't think I'll ever push past that point, as there is no reason to do so, and the scaling of life points for the arms and minions that happen post 2.5k in rage will absolutely be too great of a challenge with Revolution. I hope this guide helps you guys land that first kill on hard mode, or maybe push past the lower in rage points and get that 500% title. And if it doesn't help at all, well, here's hoping it was at the very least entertaining. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I appreciate the comments on the Raksha guide. Seems like it was very well received. I only make videos for fun when I feel like I can produce something great to watch, so thank you for sticking around. Remember to like, comment, subscribe to all that good stuff, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.